People who were in a coma. What shocked them? My great-grandfather had a stroke, spent 3 weeks in a coma. Woke up unable to speak English, only spoke Choctaw, a language he learned as a kid living near a reserve and playing with local kids. Forgot it over his life, but recalled it for 10 days after the coma. Then woke from a nightmare and spoke only English, forgetting Choctaw. Could recount every conversation he heard in the room while unconscious. The woman was in a coma for 4 days due to complications related to Crohn's disease, rupture of the colon during pregnancy. She gave birth to her son at 29 weeks by cesarean section, but when she woke up, she did not remember either pregnancy or childbirth. She lost her long-term memory. She was surprised that everyone was discussing her child. At first, she talked like a child, but after a couple of days, her memory returned. Her son, who was born weighing 1,407 kilograms, is now an 18-year-old boy with a height of 195 centimeters. Is everything okay with your son? Yes, thanks for asking. I was in a coma for 9 days. When I woke up, I was still on the ventilator. When I was turned off, my body couldn't remember how to breathe on its own. I literally had to relearn how to do it. It took me a few days. I had no natural sense of how long or deeply to inhale, how long to hold the air, or how long to exhale. I had to focus all my concentration on breathing. It was really fast-paced. Changed. For all the people who were wondering how I slept, I didn't sleep for the first couple of days. If I was napping, my oxygen sensor would start beeping and wake me up, and then the nurse would yell at me across the intensive care unit so that I wouldn't forget to breathe. I couldn't speak because I had tubes in my nose and throat, but I remember waking up very tired one day to this damn squeak. Anyway, I started concentrating on my breathing again, but it really pissed me off. My nurse ran up and screamed at me to breathe. I looked at her and shouted to my friends in an absent voice, "Yes, I'm breathing. I am." She must have read my lips and felt indignation because she just raised her hands and said, Okay, good job," and then she left. In general, I shared this because I had never had such an opportunity before. My ability to breathe normally returned to me after a month or so. I'm fine with my health right now, so I wouldn't say it's affected me on a permanent basis. Well, thanks. Now I'm watching my every breath. Don't forget to blink, asshole. You ruined the next 30 minutes of my life. My mom was in an induced coma for 3 months. When she woke up, she thought the hospital was trying to kill her. She tried to get out of bed and fell to the floor because she couldn't walk. She was mostly scared that her legs had lost their shape. I had to relearn how to control every muscle. She couldn't speak properly at all and had forgotten how to write. After relearning, she already had a different handwriting. She said she hates how perfect her hands look. Her nails and cuticles were perfect and clean from the fact that there was no way were used. I remember trying to comb her hair after she woke up. Almost all of them fell out. She almost died every day when she was in a coma. She had sepsis after diverticulitis, after an unsuccessful operation. Most of her hair grew back and she was able to walk, but she has brain damage, which makes her look very drunk. She's always dizzy, but it's been 5 years and her recovery can be called a miracle. A good friend of our family fell into a coma for 6 months. In the end, when he woke up, he was freaked out that his wife looked so old. In fact, he had lost the last 15 years from his memory. He knew he had 2 children, but they were babies, and he didn't even know about his 3rd child. The memory never returned. He jumped from the lack of mobile phones to smartphones and laptops. Everything was new to him. Stuck in the early 90s, but actually being in the 2000s, he had to learn a lot. But it was the most difficult thing for him to find out that you had forgotten the moments of your children growing up. This is the saddest story I've seen in this thread. Oh my god, that's creepy. He must have felt that this was a punishment for something terrible. My wife was in an induced coma for 2 weeks for medical reasons. When she woke up, she had false memories. All of them were based on conversations that took place in her room. For example, she thought they had flown to Washington for treatment. While she was in a coma, my father told me how he had just returned from a work trip to Washington. Somehow she overheard it while she was out, and her brain interpreted it so that she flew to Washington. Even after we explained to her the reality of where she is, it took days for her to come to terms with reality. My brother-in-law had a brain tumor, so he was out for a while when he was first admitted to the hospital. Nurses. They were of Asian descent, so when he woke up, he apologized to people for forcing them to come to Japan to see him. My stepfather was in a coma for about 3 weeks. When he woke up, he couldn't find his teeth. We completely forgot where we put them and searched for a whole week. At one point, he fell dead at the hospital sink, out of the blue. They resuscitated him, but they couldn't understand why he could barely breathe. Then the doctors sat us down and showed us x-rays with false teeth inside. They forgot to take them out when they put the tubes in his mouth, which led to a blockage of air access or something like that. So yes, we found them. Changed. Since it raised such interest, I decided to post a photo, the only one I have on my old mobile. I hope the link is working. I was in a coma for 4 days from bacterial meningitis. When I woke up, I was completely deaf. I had to communicate with my parents and doctors using a notebook and pen. Somehow, hearing gradually returned to the left ear, but the right ear is still 100% deaf. Oh! Someone else who had bacterial meningitis. I'm so glad you survived. Trust me, it could have been a lot worse. Thanks, man. I'm glad I made it too. The doctors gave me a 10% chance of life. I'm glad you did it too. Changed. I talked to my mother. She said that the doctors only gave me a 5% chance that I would survive. My wife was in a medically induced coma for 4 days. She had a reaction to the contrast dye and her heart stopped at 20 minutes. For almost 3 months, she communicated with her long-dead parents. She talked about them as if they were in the next room, or she said that her daughter or brother called her, but they didn't call. She constantly believed that her mother and father were alive. It drove me crazy when I had to carefully adjust it many times a day. She came up with amazing fairy tales about what people, relatives, friends, neighbors, are engaged in what they tell. Really creative fiction. 3 months later, she began to come to her senses. The confabulation stopped. Everything has changed. She can remember recent events, but her old memories are gone. I don't know what it feels like, but it must be terrible. Sometimes she cries for lost memories, but overall she's doing very well. My father had a reaction to contrast dye after an injury heads. There were seizures and it was like a brain reboot. He could only say, "How's the girl?" My sister had just been born. He couldn't hold things or grab them. I spent several months in therapy. Eventually his mood changed. He became very short-tempered, a little patient, and very sleepy. He's fine now except for some neck pain. About 20 years ago, my cousin suffered a serious head injury after a fall. He was about 20 years old at the time. He was in a coma for almost 4 weeks. When he woke up, he quickly discovered that he had an eidetic memory. He could recount any conversation word for word, and even tell you the date and time when you said something. In addition, he could memorize images in just a few seconds. His memory is still eidetic. It's fucking annoying. Whenever he reminds me of something I've said in the past, it's usually that I can remember. I suggest hitting him on the head one more time. Looking at what happened last time when he was hit on the head, he probably just got another superpower. It's better not to risk trying to fix it. No, it's just not working properly. You need to turn it off and turn it on again. DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis, sent me into a coma. I have vague memories of being ill, and the general feeling of time was just like porridge. Even years later, I can't set a proper timeline. I have flashbacks of different doctors coming in and out of the room. As soon as I came out of the coma, I was still not myself. When you're on an insulin drip, doctors check your sugar every hour. I've never been able to fall asleep, but have I felt asleep all this time? It's hard to describe this feeling. Just a mushy, dragging time. I was in a coma for almost 6 weeks. When I woke up, I had to learn everything again. I still had most of my speech abilities, but my motor skills were terrible. I had to learn how to wipe my ass, as well as how to get up and down stairs. It took about 3 weeks. I also lost a ton of shit. I was 190 centimeters tall and weighed about 65 kilograms. 6 weeks? Jesus Christ. Severe head injury, after which I had an MRI scan with a dye that I was very allergic to. I died on the table in a few minutes. My nephew, 14 years old, was in a medically induced coma for more than 3 months. During this time, he lost about 30% of his body weight as his muscles atrophied. His first comment when he first saw himself was, "Did you forget to feed me?" It was incredibly hard to hear, as his family sat and sobbed by his bedside the entire time he was unconscious. I was in a coma for 3 weeks from September 2nd to September 26th, 2001. I was driving through Pennsylvania on my way to Ithaca to meet with the head of the marketing department of the company I was working with at the time. I went on this trip on September 2nd, 2001, and I don't remember very well what happened, except for what the doctors and hospital staff told me. But the bottom line is that I was hit or knocked off the road by a drunk driver trying to cross 3 lanes to get to the exit where I was. Basically, I was in his blind spot at the wrong time, in addition to the fact that he was a drunken shit. Almost everyone here can guess what happened on September 11th, 2001. It feels like I've teleported or traveled through time because 1 minute I'm driving and the next I'm bleeding profusely. I'm in a hospital bed with a brace in my back and neck, burns from airbag gas, an IV drip in my arm, and a few other minor injuries. When I woke up, I was in a completely different world than the one I left. Before I fell asleep, the economy was fine. In general, everything was cool in the world. And then I woke up. Chaos. That's all it was then. Thanks a lot for watching. Write in the comments if you were in a coma. What did you get fucked up from when you woke up? Plus, don't forget to watch some videos from our channel.